You've chipped the table.
My name is Clara Hayes, and this is the story of how I lost a family but built an empire. Have you ever wondered where the absolute final line is for a family? The point of no return. For me, it was right here. In this split second, with the polished wood floors of our Austin home reflecting the cold, unforgiving light. This was the moment a father chose to shatter his daughter, all to soothe the bruised ego of the son he adored. 24 hours earlier, the air at Viridian Dynamics crackled with a different kind of energy. It was the electric hum of innovation, the smell of burnt coffee and breakthroughs. The CEO had just shaken my hand, his voice booming across the boardroom. The youngest director of innovation in Viridian's history. The Helios project is revolutionary, Clara. You earned this. 10 years of 80-hour work weeks, of sacrificing holidays and friendships, had finally paid off. I felt like I could fly. My first instinct was to share the news, so I pulled out my phone and video called my mom. I saw her face, framed by the familiar floral wallpaper of her home. "Mom, I got it. Director!" I beamed. The smile on her face was thin, brittle. "That's nice, dear," she said, her voice flat. "But have you considered Ethan? A position like that could really help him get his life on track." The silence that followed was colder than a freak Austin snowstorm. If you've ever felt that specific chill of disapproval when you expected a warm hug, just do me a favor and hit the like button on this video so I know I'm not alone. Her words were the first crack in the foundation of my world. I just didn't know it yet. Despite that icy phone call, I clung to a stubborn thread of hope. I told myself she was just having a bad day. So I went ahead with the celebration dinner I had planned at a high-end steakhouse in downtown Austin. My team was there, their faces bright with genuine happiness for me. For an hour, I allowed myself to bask in it, to feel the warmth of true camaraderie. Then my family arrived. My father, Richard, walked in with the stiff posture of a man attending a funeral, not a celebration. My mother, Linda, wouldn't meet my eyes. And trailing behind them was my brother, Ethan, already unsteady on his feet, his eyes glazed over with alcohol and arrogance. He made a show of ignoring me, heading straight to the bar. Just as dessert was being served, he grabbed a fork and clinked it against his glass, a discordant chime that silenced the room. He swayed slightly as he raised his glass. "A toast," he slurred, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "To my big sister, Clara, the living proof that with enough 80-hour weeks and sacrificing your entire social life, anyone can climb the corporate ladder." A few people chuckled nervously. He wasn't done. "She had to work for it. Me. I was born at the top. This is just her keeping my seat warm until I'm ready to take my rightful place." In that moment, under the dim, expensive lighting of the restaurant, time just stopped. Every sound faded except the ringing in my ears. I'm curious. Wherever you are in the world watching this right now, what time is it for you? Let me know in the comments, because in that instant, my entire world froze on the spot. My father's lips twitched into a smirk of approval. My mother just stared intently at her crème brûlée, as if it held all the secrets of the universe. I had never felt so utterly alone in a room full of people. The ride home was suffocating. The silence in my father's car was a living thing, thick with my humiliation and their righteous anger. I should have just called an Uber, but I was frozen, trapped in a family ritual I couldn't seem to escape. When we walked into the living room, the trap sprung. My father stood in the center of the room like a prosecuting attorney. "How dare you?" he began, his voice dangerously low. "How dare you put on a show and make your brother feel inadequate?" I stared at him, the absurdity of his words a fresh wave of pain. "I made him feel inadequate?" I shot back, my voice trembling with a rage I hadn't felt before. He announced to my CEO that I was just a placeholder. The argument escalated, his demands growing more insane. I was to go to HR tomorrow, reject the promotion, and recommend Ethan for a consultation role. I was to apologize. I finally found my footing, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even me. "No, I will not light myself on fire to keep you warm anymore. I earned this, and I am keeping it." That was the trigger. "It's over when I say it's over," he roared, his face turning a deep, terrifying crimson. He lunged forward, not to slap me, but shoving me with the full force of his body. My feet tangled, the world tilted sideways, and the last thing I saw was the sharp, polished edge of their new glass coffee table rushing up to meet me. A sickening crack echoed in the room, followed by a searing pain in my temple. I lay on the floor, dazed, the warm, sticky feeling of blood starting to trickle down my face. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard my mother rush forward, but her cry wasn't for me. "Richard, the table!" she shrieked, her voice thin with panic. "You've chipped the glass! We just bought it!" In that one horrific moment, something inside me shifted. The searing pain in my head was nothing compared to the cold, clear certainty that washed over me. The girl who desperately sought their approval died right there on that Persian rug next to a chipped glass table. I slowly pushed myself up, my movements deliberate. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I touched the sticky warmth at my temple, looked at the blood on my fingertips, and then I looked at them. My father, his chest still heaving. My mother, now trying to subtly inspect the damage to her precious furniture. I gave them nothing. My face was a blank canvas. Without a word, I turned and walked past them, up the stairs to my old childhood bedroom. I could feel their confused, stunned silence behind me. I closed the door, and the soft click of the lock was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a final goodbye. I sat down at my old desk, the wood scarred with teenage graffiti, and opened my laptop. The screen's glow cast long shadows on the wall. I created a new encrypted document. The title, Case File, Zita Hayes versus R. Hayes et al. I began to type, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Date, July 15th, 2025. Time, approximately 10:45 p.m. Central. Incident, physical assault by Richard Hayes, resulting in a head laceration. I detailed every insult at the dinner, every word of the argument, and my mother's exact chilling quote about the table. They didn't just cross a line, they had incinerated the entire map. In that moment, I knew I had two options. I could let this break me, or I could let it be the thing that finally made me. If you were in my shoes, bleeding and betrayed, comment 1 for crumbling or 2 for fighting back. I genuinely need to know what you would have done. I saved the document. This wasn't a diary. It was the beginning of an arsenal. The sun rose on a world that felt alien. The adrenaline from the night before had evaporated, leaving a hollow, throbbing ache in my head and a much deeper one in my chest. Staring at the case file I had started on my laptop, the reality of my declaration of war felt crushing. I was one person. How could I possibly take on my own family, a unit that had perfected the art of protecting its golden boy at all costs. For a terrifying hour, I felt the resolve draining out of me, replaced by the familiar cold dread of isolation. I almost deleted the file. I almost convinced myself to just pack a bag, leave town, and let them win. Then, a face swam into my memory. Eleanor Vance. She was the former VP of engineering at Veridian, a woman made of titanium and sharp wit, who had retired a few years back. She had been my mentor, the one who saw my potential when I was just a nervous intern. She was the complete opposite of my mother. She celebrated strength. She didn't punish it. My hands trembled as I found her number and dialed. After 3 rings, her voice cut through the phone, as crisp as ever. Vance. I stumbled through the story, my voice cracking as I recounted the promotion, the dinner, the shove, the chipped glass table. There was a long pause on the other end. I braced myself for pity. I didn't get it. Good, Eleanor said, her voice steely. You're finally angry. Now stop crying and start fighting. Tears don't win wars, Clara. Strategy does. She continued. You're going to call a woman named Jessica Chen. She's the top corporate attorney in Austin. Don't think of her as a lawyer. Think of her as a weapon. Tell her I sent you. Now go wash your face, put some ice on your head, and get to work. The line clicked dead. And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. I had my first ally. Jessica Chen's office was on the 40th floor of a glass tower overlooking downtown Austin. It was minimalist, modern, and radiated a quiet, lethal competence. I sat across from her, wearing my best suit, feeling like a child playing dress-up. I told her everything, my voice steady as I recounted the facts I had meticulously documented. She listened without a single flicker of emotion, her eyes sharp and intelligent. When I finished, she simply nodded. Okay, let's start with the money. I told her about the trust fund my maternal grandfather had left me, a fund my father always claimed was hopelessly entangled in legal issues. Jessica's team got to work. What they found within 48 hours was not a legal issue. It was a crime scene. The $5 million trust wasn't entangled. It was empty. For almost a decade, my father and Ethan had been siphoning it away. A failed crypto venture for Ethan that lost 6 figures overnight. A down payment on his ridiculous sports car. First-class flights to Europe. It was a systematic plundering of my inheritance, my security, my past, and my future. I felt sick. But that wasn't the worst of it. That wasn't the discovery that made my blood run cold. Jessica's forensic team, with my permission, did a deep dive into my work communications. A few days later, she called me back into her office and turned her monitor to face me. On the screen was an email chain between my father and a vice president at our biggest market rival. My father wasn't just planning to get me demoted. He was conspiring with them, creating a false data trail to make it look like I had been selling the source code for my Helios project. They weren't just trying to take my job. They were trying to send me to prison. They were willing to watch me be led away in handcuffs to protect Ethan's fragile ego. Staring at that email, at the casual, cruel words plotting the end of my life as I knew it, I expected to shatter. I waited for the screams, the tears, the tidal wave of grief, but it never came. Instead, a strange and terrifying calm settled over me. It was the kind of calm you hear about in the eye of a hurricane. The pain was so absolute, so profound, it burned away everything else. It incinerated the fear, the doubt, and the last lingering traces of love I had for those people. All that remained was a single diamond hard point of purpose. I looked up from the monitor and met Jessica Chen's gaze. She had been watching me, likely expecting a breakdown. What she got was a general, "They want to see me in prison," I said, my voice devoid of any tremor. They were willing to sacrifice my freedom for his comfort. I stood up and walked to the vast window overlooking the city. All the years of being told I was too sensitive, too ambitious, too much. It all felt like fuel now. They had built their comfortable little kingdom on my pain, on my labor, on my future. It was time for my empire to strike back. Tell me about a time you turned your deepest pain into your greatest strength. I want to read every single one of your stories in the comments because in that moment, I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for everyone who had ever been told to shrink. I turned back to Jessica. "So, we give them a war," I said. "Not an emotional one, a clinical one. We go after the trust fund. We file a whistleblower complaint so precise it triggers a full internal audit. We gather every email and every memo, every shred of evidence that showcases their corruption and incompetence. We don't just clear my name. We dismantle their entire world, piece by piece." Jessica's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Now," she said, "we can begin." The whistleblower complaint landed inside Viridian Dynamics like a silent surgical strike. It triggered the exact internal audit we had planned, an investigation into ethics violations and conflicts of interest. I watched my father and brother from afar. They were arrogant, smug, completely assured that the company's gaze would never fall on them. They had underestimated me my entire life. It was a fatal error. 2 weeks later, on the day of the quarterly board meeting, I chose my armor. A navy blue suit so sharp it could cut glass, and heels that clicked on the marble floors of the executive wing like a ticking clock. I walked into the boardroom uninvited. My father, sitting near the head of the long mahogany table, looked up, his face a mask of annoyance. "Clara, this is a closed meeting." I gave him a serene smile. "I know," I replied, my voice echoing slightly in the tense silence. "The audit committee has granted me 10 minutes. I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes then. It was beautiful. I plugged my encrypted thumb drive into the projector. I didn't begin with accusations. I began with facts. A timeline of workplace harassment, emails detailing the plot to have me demoted due to emotional instability. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Then, I delivered the first killing blow. And now, I'd like to introduce a special consultant who has been assisting the audit. On the large screen at the end of the room, the face of a man in a crisp suit appeared. He was the forensic accountant from Dallas. Calmly, professionally, he presented his findings, a detailed, undeniable map of how Richard Hayes had systematically defrauded a $5 million trust fund belonging to his own daughter. Bank statements, shell corporations, wire transfers for Ethan's sports cars. It was all there in stark, damning detail. My father's face went from crimson to a ghastly, bloodless white. His empire had just begun to burn. The silence in the boardroom was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. My father sat frozen, a statue of disbelief. I let the silence hang for a moment before delivering the coup de grace. "And for any of you who still think this was a simple family matter," I said, my voice cutting through the tension, "I have one last thing." I pressed a button, and my brother Ethan's voice filled the room, a drunken, arrogant boast from an audio file I had obtained. He was bragging to his friends about how his dad was about to get his psycho sister locked up for treason so he could finally take over. Treason. That was the word that sealed their fate. The chairman, a man with ice water in his veins, didn't even call for a discussion. He called for a vote. It was unanimous. Richard Hayes was suspended, effective immediately, pending a criminal investigation. He was barred from the premises. 2 security guards, who had been waiting discreetly outside, entered the room and stood by his chair. He was escorted out of the building he had helped lead for 20 years, not with a golden parachute, but with a shadow of disgrace. The next morning, Jessica Chen filed our civil lawsuit. The charges were brutal: organized fraud, identity theft, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. As planned, key documents were leaked to the Wall Street Journal. The story didn't just break, it detonated. It was everywhere. Their carefully constructed world of prestige and respectability was vaporized in a single news cycle. Have you ever witnessed karma play out so perfectly in real life? That beautiful, satisfying moment when the universe finally balances the scales? Tell me about it in the comments below, because watching their world burn from the top of my glass tower was the most righteous feeling I've ever known. Their country club membership was revoked. Lifelong friends suddenly stopped answering their calls. They had become toxic. Their downfall was total, public, and swift. While their world was imploding, mine was being reborn. The chaos my father left in his wake at Viridian created a power vacuum. With the board reeling from the scandal and deeply indebted to me for exposing the rot, I had leverage. Guided by Jessica, I made my move. I didn't just want my old job back. I wanted to remake the company's DNA. Using a substantial portion of my recovered $5 million trust, I began strategically acquiring company shares, becoming a majority stakeholder. I didn't ask for a promotion. I demanded a new division. I became the first president of innovation and corporate ethics. The title itself was a statement. Our future growth would be inextricably linked to our moral compass. My first act wasn't to punish the people who had been bystanders. It was to build. I established the Eleanor Fund, a multi-million-dollar internal grant and mentorship program named for my mentor, designed specifically to fund and elevate projects led by women and minorities in our RD departments. I used the very money my father had stolen to create opportunities he would never have allowed. We implemented a policy of radical transparency in promotions and compensation. No more backroom deals. No more nepotism. The results were immediate and staggering. In the 6 months that followed, employee turnover dropped by 40%. Our stock price, after the initial shock, climbed 15% to an all-time high. And the Helios project, my baby, was fully funded and on the fast track for FDA approval. We weren't just recovering. We were thriving because of the changes, not in spite of them. I was building an empire founded on merit and respect, while the architects of my pain were learning what it felt like to have nothing left but the wreckage of their own choices. Almost a year to the day after the boardroom showdown, my assistant's voice crackled over the intercom, laced with anxiety. "Clara, your parents are here. They don't have an appointment." I took a deep breath. "Send them in." They walked into my office, and the change was staggering. They were ghosts. My father, Richard, who had once commanded boardrooms, was stooped and thin. His suit was cheap, his eyes hollowed out. My mother's face was a roadmap of bitterness, her hands fidgeting with a worn-out purse. They stood awkwardly in the vast space, dwarfed by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city I now helped to shape. It was my father who finally spoke, his voice a dry rasp, his gaze fixed on the expensive rug. Ethan is living with us again, in a 2-bedroom rental in Kyle. He's not, well, your mother's job at the florist doesn't cover everything. We need work, Clara. Anything. I let the silence stretch, savoring the complete reversal of our universe. I stood, walked calmly to my desk, and pulled out a sleek leather folder. From it, I produced a single document and slid it across the polished mahogany. "What's this?" he mumbled. "That," I said, my voice perfectly level, "is a legally binding restraining order that went into effect this morning. It stipulates that you are to remain at least 500 feet from my home and my places of work. You are currently in violation of it." Their jaws dropped. The color drained from my mother's face. Before they could process it, I slid 2 more pieces of paper towards them. "However, since you came looking for work," they were application forms for the night shift custodial crew at our North Side warehouse. Minimum wage, no benefits. My mother hissed, "You're cruel." I met her gaze, no anger left in me, only a vast, empty peace. "No," I corrected her gently, "I'm fair. Now security will be here in 60 seconds to escort you out." As the silent elevator doors closed, taking the ghosts of my past with them, a quiet I hadn't felt in over a year settled into my bones. It wasn't the giddy thrill of victory or the bitter taste of revenge. It was peace. A profound, unshakable peace that comes from closing a book you never wanted to write. I walked back to the window, the city lights of Austin beginning to sparkle like a field of fallen stars. They had tried to break me, to erase me, to sacrifice me on the altar of my brother's ego. They failed to understand that you can't destroy someone who is willing to rebuild herself from the bedrock up. They thought I was a pawn in their game, a piece to be moved and sacrificed. They never realized I wasn't playing their game. I was the board itself. My story is an extreme one, but the weapons I used to win my war are universal, and I didn't go through hell just to keep them to myself. So, for anyone out there feeling trapped, here is what I learned. First, document everything. Your memory is a journal. Your evidence is a sword. In any dispute, the person with the best records wins. Second, your boundaries are not suggestions. They are sacred ground. Kindness without boundaries is just self-destruction. Build your fences high. Third, never fight a war alone. Find your allies, a mentor, a lawyer, a true friend. Your war council is your greatest asset. And finally, your worth is never, ever determined by the people who refuse to see it. It is absolute, it is inherent, it is yours alone. I turned my pain into power, my wreckage into an empire. If you believe in the power to build your own life on your own terms, then hit that subscribe button and join this community of fighters. Our stories are just beginning.